תודה לך, תודה לך, תודה לך כלי הולך איתך ורק איתך לא יכול בלי תודה לך על חושך ויאללה אור הטוב תודה לך אתה תמיד קרוב תודה לך על שמש בשמיים בכל יום על אהבה המלווה לכל מקום תודה לך על הניסים ויאללה טבע גם מודה אני מלך חי וקיים תודה תודה לך השם הלב דורש ומבקש על מה שיש לומר תודה 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 לך השם כל הנשמה תהלל קי וחכה רק לשיר תודה 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 לך השם הלב דורש ומבקש על מה שיש לומר תודה 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 לך השם כל הנשמה תהלל קי וחכה רק לשיר תודה פותח את ידיך ומשפיע לכל חי בהרי כויסי לוחם רוחו הקליטאי הקל הזן ומפרנס גוזר ומקיים על הכל תודה לך השם תודה תודה לך השם הלב דורש ומבקש על מה שיש לומר תודה 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 לך השם כל הנשמה תהלל קי וחכה רק לשיר תודה 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 לך השם הלב דורש ומבקש על מה שיש לומר תודה 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 לך השם כל הנשמה תהלל קי וחכה רק לשיר תודה For every day you give to me my future and my history תודה לך Cause you're the music and the rhyme, you're the rhythm and the time, תודה לך I know that there's a reason and a plan, and so I try the best I can to make you proud. So all the friends I made along the way, let me hear you sing it out loud. Toda, my thanks to you, my life is all from you. The light is you, the darkness too, you. Toda, my thanks to you, my life is love for you. Though I am small, I hear your call that you love me too. Toda, my thanks to you, my life is all from you. The ones I love are gifts of love from you. The tears I've cried and joy, the friends that I've enjoyed. It's all your love from up above. No, I love you too. Toda, toda lecha Hashem. הלב דורש ומבקש על מה שיש לומר. תודה, תודה, תודה לך השם. כל הנשמה תהלל קי וחכה רק לשיר תודה. תודה לך. My thanks to you, my life is all from you. The ones I love are gifts of love from you. The tears I've cried and joy, the friends that I've enjoyed. It's all your love from up above. No, I love you too. Toda, toda lecha Hashem. הלב דורש ומבקש על מה שיש לומר. תודה, תודה, תודה לך השם. כל הנשמה תהלל קי וחכה רק לשיר תודה. תודה לך.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone, and welcome to this week's Torah Straight Talk. I'm Denzel Anthony from Kehilat, Bethlechem. I believe we had an amazing Hanukkah week, and as we are almost done with the 8th day of Hanukkah, which started last evening when we lit the 8th candle, we learned some really good songs this week and this season. And above all, one thing that stood out is that the light, Ha'or, which is Mashiach, Yeshua, the light of Yeshua has to radiate out from us so that we become the light that shines in darkness. Before we get into the studying of this week's Torah portion, let us say the blessing for the study of the word. And we say, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu be'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok bedevrei Torah. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who has sanctified us with his commandments and commanded us to engross ourselves in the words of the Torah. This week, we are in the portion of Miketz. Now, the word Miketz translates to at the end, comes from the word ketz, which means end, which happens to be the 10th Torah portion this year. From the time we began in Tishrei, this is the 10th Torah portion. And we are in the 10th month, Tevet, of the religious calendar, which began in the month of Nisan, which was around in March and April time in our Gregorian calendar. And interestingly enough, in this week's portion, we study about the 10 brothers of Joseph who go down to Egypt. Now, is that a coincidence? We see 10 all over as we come to this Torah portion. In Genesis chapter 42 verse 3, it says, so 10, the word over there for 10 is Asara, of Joseph's brothers went down to get grain rations in Egypt. The word for 10 given over there is the word Asara in Hebrew. The way it is spelled is, it's got a letter Ayin. For those of you who know Hebrew, it's got the letter Ayin and then followed by Sheen, then Resh, and then a He. Now, and Hebrew is read from right to left. But if you look at this word, Asara, from left to right, it would read the word Harasha, which means the wicked. The word Asara, if read left to right, would read the word Harasha, which is probably a way to denote the wickedness that the brothers did to Joseph, their brother. The word 10 there is really superfluous, as the very next verse, which is 42 verse 4, mentions that Benjamin did not go. So for people who can do basic mathematics, we know that among the 11 brothers, or among the 12 brothers, one is in Egypt, who is Joseph. The remaining 11 are there. And if Benjamin is not to go, how many people are left? We have 10. And so it's a simple math. But yet the Torah goes on to mention the word 10 over there very specifically. Now the sages of our blessed memory say that Joseph's brothers expected to meet or come across their brother in Egypt. But they definitely did not expect to find him in the position that they eventually found him in. Now, in Genesis chapter 42, verse 3, it also says in Hebrew, Vayerdu Aki Yosef. It means, it says the brothers of Joseph went down. Basically, that's the translation of it. It does not call them, the sages of a blessed memory say that the portion does not call them the sons of Yaakov, but instead it calls them Joseph's brothers, thus suggesting that they regretted having sold him and that they had made up their mind to behave towards him in a brotherly manner and to redeem him at whatever price people might fix for them to pay, so that when they meet Joseph eventually in Egypt and he would be down in a mess, or he's there as a slave, they would redeem him and they would bring him back. But we all know how the story goes on to unfold and how they find Joseph, or in what situation they find Joseph in. Now, moving forward, we see how the incidents unfold. The brothers go to Egypt. Joseph recognizes his brothers, but his brothers do not recognize him. Joseph accuses them of spying. And to prove that they are not spies, the brothers have to go back and get the youngest brother, Benjamin, and return. And then we see that Joseph first says that he's going to keep everybody in custody and would just let one person go back. But then he keeps them for 3 days, and then he releases them and says that he would keep one of them in custody and let the others go, so that they would go and bring back and come back along with Benjamin. Now in Genesis chapter 43, verse 3 to 5, we go on to see that when the brothers reach back to Yaakov and they narrate this entire incident that happened with Joseph, they go on to say that he has actually required that the younger brother also come along with them. Now in 43 verse 3 to 5 it says, "But Judah said to him, the man warned us, 'Do not let me see your faces unless your brother is with you. If you will let our brother go with us, we will go down and procure food for you. But if you will not let him go, we will not go down.' For the man here, the man is Joseph, whom Judah is talking about. 'And do not let me see your faces until your brother is with you.'" And so if Yaakov was not going to let Benjamin to go along with the brothers, they were not willing to go because Joseph had made it clear to them that they had to come back with the younger brother. Now, if we would see here the entire incident, if you would read, we would see that Yaakov is unwilling to send his youngest son with the brothers, fearing that he would lose him too. And it is only after Judah's assurance that Yaakov agrees to send Benjamin. If we go into the detail of this, we'll find that Reuben steps in before Judah and says that if Benjamin does not come back, let his sons be killed. That does not comfort anybody. At least that does not comfort the father. And so Judah has to step in and take responsibility. And he says that he will give an assurance that Benjamin would come back. Now Joseph knew this very well, that unless the brothers were willing to take the responsibility of the younger brother, Yaakov, their father, would not send Benjamin with them. Now this concept of being responsible for someone or your brothers or your fellow beings in Jewish thought is known as ahava. Now, this is understood as all of Israel is responsible for each other. That's what it essentially means. Later down in the passage, as we read below, we will see that when Joseph frames Benjamin for thievery, Judah steps in again and offers his own life instead. And it is then that Joseph is not able to go. And he reveals himself that he is Joseph, their brother. Now, until this time, Joseph was really waiting to see that what their brothers would do for the younger brother. And especially if you know the previous Torah portions, Benjamin was not their brother from their own mother. He was their brother from a different mother. He was the son of Rachel. And Joseph and Benjamin were essentially the brothers from the same mother. And so what would they do for Benjamin if he was caught? And Joseph wanted to see this. Now in 70 CE, if you remember what happened when the Beit HaMikdash, or the temple in Jerusalem, was destroyed, one of the main reasons the sages of the time said that it happened was because of baseless hatred among brothers. It was hatred, or rather baseless hatred. In Hebrew, it is known as sinat chinam, which it was the baseless hatred that was against Yeshua too. Today, Yeshua, our Messiah, is foreign to our Jewish brothers. He's in a foreign culture, looks totally alien. He's waiting to see if his body, the body of Mashiach, has come to a point of being responsible for one another. Or in a sense, all of Israel has come to a point where they are responsible for one another. He right now is Mashiach ben Yosef, who, like Yosef, is separate from his people, his land, his culture, and his brothers. He is in a foreign garment, and his brothers do not recognize him. But from the scriptures, we understand that this is not the end state. There is a restoration that will happen. Now, the most amazing part of this restoration that we will see from this week's Torah portion is that the sons of Joseph, Ephraim and Manasseh, are taken by Yaakov as his own sons. Now, this whole incident of taking as sons comes in a later Torah portion. But then we see that the sons that were born to Joseph in this Torah portion, which is Ephraim and Manasseh, are later on taken by Yaakov when they meet as his own sons. These sons were born to Joseph in a foreign land. And it essentially represents us from the nations who are being grafted in by the Mashiach, by Mashiach Yeshua himself, to the family of Israel. This restoration is going to be glorious, and the children of Joseph have a big role to play in this. If you look at Genesis chapter 42, verse 23, it says, they did not know that Joseph understood, for there was an interpreter between him and them. The sages of our blessed memory say that it was Manasseh ben Joseph who was interpreting between Joseph and his brothers, while Joseph played the stranger who did not understand them and their language. Now, think for a moment, if Manasseh had to be interpreting what the brothers were saying to Joseph, it means that Manasseh knew their language, which was Hebrew, and he was interpreting it to Joseph. While Joseph all this while was acting, because he himself knew the language. And we know that they thought that Joseph could not understand, but Joseph understood everything. And so this role of the interpreter that Manasseh is playing over there is very crucial. It gives a glimpse of what the role of us from the nations is going to be in this restoration that is going to happen. Rav Shaul or Apostle Paul talks about the blindness that has happened to Jewish people in part, due to which they don't recognize their Messiah. Now, this blindness is put in by Hashem, and it is for a purpose. It is the role of Manasseh, or in true sense, it is the role of us from the nations, that we present the right image of Yeshua to our Jewish brothers. That we would rid ourselves of trying to be the greater in the kingdom, or trying to be ahead of one another. And if you would remember a few weeks before, when I had mentioned about the blessing that we say upon the sons, all of Israel blesses their sons with the blessing of Ephraim and Manasseh, because these were the two brothers who never had a sense of competition among them. They never fought among themselves. And so all of Israel blesses their sons with the name of Ephraim and Manasseh. And so that as we read, that Joseph waited to see whether his brothers would take up the responsibility of their own brother Benjamin. Today, Yeshua is essentially waiting upon us to see that sense of responsibility that we should have towards the brother or Israel or our Jewish brothers, or even people among us, along with us in the body of Mashiach. Are we responsible for them? Or am I only focused on my spirituality, or how am I going to be right with Hashem? My worship unto Hashem, my righteous deeds, my good works. Is it all about me, or is it about also my brother who is not able to walk, but yet he is my responsibility? And so I walk taking him along with me. And listen to this, as we conclude I'm going to read a passage from Ezekiel chapter 37, verse 15 onwards. And if we can put it up on the screen, it would be great. We are going to read from Ezekiel chapter 37, verse 15 onwards. It says, The word of Adonai came to me saying, You son of man, take one stick and write on it for Judah, for Bnei Israel joined with him. Then take another stick and write on it for Joseph, the stick of Ephraim, and all the house of Israel joined with him. Now, before we move on, one thing that we need to remember and understand here is that Ephraim, or the sons that were born to Joseph, represents us from the nations who were not born or brought up in the household of Israel, but were born outside the land where Joseph was a foreigner. And so these children, Ephraim and Manasseh, were born to Joseph outside the land. And so it represents us. And as we read what this passage, as we go on, reminds us of is what Rav Shaul talks about, the one new man. And let's read this, continue reading this. Then take another stick and write on it for Joseph, the stick of Ephraim, and all the house of Israel joined with him. Join them one to another for yourself as one stick, so they may become one in your hand. When the children of your people speak to you, saying, Won't you tell us what you mean by this? Say to them, Thus says Adonai Elohim, Behold, I will take the stick of Joseph, which is the hand of Ephraim, and the tribes of Israel joined with him, and I will put them together with the stick of Judah, and make them one stick. They will be one in my hand. The sticks that you write on will be in your hand before their eyes. Then say to them, Thus says Adonai Elohim, Behold, I will take Bnei Israel from among nations where they have gone. I will gather them from every side and bring them into their own land. I will make them one nation in the land, on the mountains of Israel, and one king will be king to them all. There will no longer be two nations, and never again be divided into two kingdoms. They will never again be defiled with their idols, their detestable things, or with any of their transgressions. I will save them out of their dwellings in which they sin. I will purify them. Then they will be my people, and I will be their God. My servant David will be king over them. They will all have one shepherd. And if you remember this last week, we sang the song that David Hamelech lives forever. And what we understood from that word, it essentially, the song talks about Mashiach ben David, who will rule or who will be king about the entire household of Israel or the entire nation of Israel. My servant David will be king over them. They will all have one shepherd. They will walk in my ordinances and observe my rulings and do them. They will live in the land that I gave to my servant Jacob, where your ancestors lived. They will live there, they, their children, and their children's children forever. And my servant David will be their prince forever. I will cut a covenant of shalom with them. It will be an everlasting covenant with them. I will give to them and multiply them. I will set up my sanctuary among them forever. My dwelling place will be over them. I will be their God and they will be my people. Then the nations will know that I am Adonai, who sanctifies Israel, when my sanctuary is in their midst forever. Isn't that amazing that this whole passage gives us a picture of how we from the nations who are being engrafted into the family of Israel, and Israel themselves, our Jewish brothers, will be brought together in the hand of Hashem. And He will be our God, and we will be His people. And it's amazing to see that the covenant that Hashem is cutting is with the household of Israel. It is not if we are standing separate from them. And that is what we need to understand today, that if we are part of Israel, that if we are part of the family of Israel, and if we claim to be followers of Mashiach Yeshua, if we claim to be the Talmidim or disciples of Mashiach Yeshua, then one thing that He is looking for is Aravut. He is looking to see if we are responsible. If we are just leading our own lives, our own spiritual lives, or are we really responsible for other people as well? That is what He's looking for in us today. So as we close and as we are going to enter into Shabbat this evening, I pray that as we do the Erev Shabbat, as we welcome the Shabbat, that this thought would take deep roots in our hearts, that the Shabbat, and as we enjoy the Shabbat, it's just not about me and God, but it is also about us as brothers, everybody together, those who have still not seen the truth of this faith, that even we are even responsible for them. And so when we celebrate the Shabbat, we would be mindful of that it would not just, our focus would not just be me, ourselves, our own selves being right with God, but it would be other people also, our brothers, everybody along with us. And so I pray that you will find shalom even as we close the week of Hanukkah and we enter into Shabbat. I pray that the joy will continue to be in our homes and in our hearts, and that we would have a blessed Shabbat. Have a blessed Shabbat and a good week ahead. Until next week when we see again. Lehitraot and Shabbat Shalom.
Hashem Adonenu, Oimo Adir Shimcha, B'chol ha'aretz Adir Adirenu. Hashem Adonenu, Oimo Adir Shimcha, B'chol ha'aretz.